Hello, 7th grade art students. So today we are going to be starting on our art history art, which, as you know, is inspired by all of the art history that you guys did in your research last week. So today we're going to be looking at this page and this page. So this first page obviously has 3 circles on it. In each of these circles, what you are going to do is complete a sketch, a practice drawing of what a circle inspired by the artist that you researched might look like. So, for instance, if I am researching Piet Mondrian, I know that he made a lot of really straight, angular, sort of geometric types of designs that used the primary colors red, yellow, blue, and also used black and white. So what I would want to do would be to look at some examples of his work, and then I would use a straight edge, a ruler, the flat side of a protractor, something like that, to then create a Piet Mondrian inspired design in each one of these circles. So for instance, that might look something like this. I've got my straight edge here. I'm going to make sure it's pretty straight. So remember, you will be looking at examples of your artist's work, but you do not necessarily need to, or even want to, really, completely copy that artist's work. What you want to do this time is create your own piece of artwork that would be similar to the artist who you researched. So now, because Piet Mondrian did some very square type designs, what I'm doing right now is basically dividing my circle into a bunch of different straight, horizontal, and vertical lines, creating squares and grids the same way that he did. So now, one of the nice things about this is that there's no real right or wrong, as long as I can tell that my work is inspired by the artist that I researched. So that might be sketch number 1. So I'm just going to put number 1 here. I'm going to put number 2 and a number 3, because all 3 of these circles have to be completed in a way that could be inspired by the artist that you have researched. So I might move on to the next example now. And the goal here is to try to make this one different than the first one, but still be very inspired by Piet Mondrian. Because essentially what we want to do is figure out which design we like best to be able to use in our circle and add color. So you can measure very precisely, like for instance right here, if I wanted to line the centimeters up, I could then make little hash marks. Say I want 3 sections that are equal, and then I can move my ruler up and make those same hash marks toward the top. And then I would just connect those on across. And then I know I'm going to have equal sections within this one section. Which, because if you are one of the ones who study Piet Mondrian, you will know that he has several sections where he does just have sort of rectangles or squares, and they are fully colored in the primary colors. He has other areas where he just has sort of like here where he had a single square or 2. But all of the lines should be perfectly perpendicular to each other and only horizontal or vertical if you are doing something inspired by Piet Mondrian. So that might be my second sketch. And then I might move on down and make a third sketch. You can make more than 3 sketches if you need to, but usually 3 is a pretty good number. So here I'm just using the different parts of my protractor to measure sort of where I want to put those lines to make sure that they are truly parallel. Notice that sometimes I'll go all the way across the circle, other times I'll only go across certain parts of the circle, because what that's going to do is help me create an interesting type of grid like Mondrian did, which only is in certain areas and not necessarily the same type of checkerboard all over the whole thing. So that might be my third design. So here I have 3 different designs. I'll move it up a little closer so you can see each one. Number 1, number 2, and design number 3. So what I would want to do now would be to go ahead and figure out which one of those designs I like the best, because each of you will get a blank piece of paper that has a large circle drawn on it. These pieces of paper will look like this, to where it's perfectly blank, just has a large circle. Most likely we will not get to this part until tomorrow. But then what you'll be doing is on that circle, you will be drawing the design that you pick and then adding color as outlined on this page. This particular page, the very last page of the assignment, goes over sort of what materials would be best for different artists and their work, so that you can make sure that your work sort of mimics their style and looks like their material chosen. So Piet Mondrian often had bright squares and rectangles, so I've used a Sharpie here to make sure that my colors stay really bright and vibrant. So this is step 1, doing your 3 different sketches, and then you'll get your blank piece of paper and very carefully and lightly draw your favorite design from your artist. And then the last thing to do will be to add color. So most likely we will be doing this today. This step will be tomorrow and possibly the next day, depending on how detailed your drawing is. And then by Thursday and Friday, everybody should be working on adding color. So I do want to just show you a couple of other examples. This is a circle that could be inspired by Sonia Delaunay. As you can see, it's got a lot of her straight edges and her sort of curves and semicircles, different things like that. So each square, or each circle, is going to look completely different, even if you have picked the same artist or been assigned the same artist, because each of your designs will be different from each other's. So this is an example of a circle that could be inspired by Salvador Dali's work. He is the artist who did the melting clock. He does very surrealist type of work where he's got butterflies instead of rose petals and different things like that. So what I've done is looked at a couple different paintings of Salvador Dali's, and I have kind of drawn parts of them into the circle to create my own Dali-inspired design. So this took me quite a while, and that's what I mean by some of your drawings will take probably 2 days to complete before you can start adding color. And I will eventually be adding color to this example, as well as my Sonia Delaunay example, and I will post videos of adding color once I get to that point. Now on this example, as with my Piet Mondrian example, before I add color, I'm going to want to outline with an ultra-fine tip Sharpie. You don't necessarily have to do that, but with something that is very geometric, it can often be a good idea in terms of keeping your design and your patterns very neat and crisp and clean. On something that has a little bit more detail, like the Salvador Dali piece, I may or may not outline things. I may outline parts of it and not other parts, but on this particular piece, I definitely plan on using colored pencil to add the coloring steps, because Dali's work involves a lot of different values and shading and things like that, which Mondrian and Delaunay's work does not, which is why a Sharpie is a good selection for their projects, but not a good idea to do on a Dali or a more detailed version. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and start to outline my Sonia Delaunay a little bit, simply because I do have a little bit of time, and I want to remind you guys of a couple of things. Anytime you have a straight line, whether you are in the drawing step or the outlining step, you definitely want to use a ruler or some other type of straight-edged tool. So carefully trace. You can use color for this, you can use black. And like I said, you don't necessarily have to do this step. You could just jump right in with color, but you would still want to be very careful and neat with your work. So let's do this line in a color. Because her work is quite colorful and bright and vibrant, and I want to make sure that I get that clearly across in my sort of Delaunay inspired work. So you'll see I had to go over that line a couple times to make sure that it would be nice and bright and solid, and that's totally fine. Anytime you have to go over a line more than once, just do so. Totally fine, nothing wrong with it. So now on the circles, the main suggestion I have is to go very slowly and start with an area where it overlaps another shape, so that you can treat that one little section of the circle as its own line, rather than trying to draw the whole shape all at once. Because circles and semicircles and those types of shapes are quite difficult to draw. So you do want to make sure that you do whatever you can to make it easier for yourself to complete those curves. And you can use a regular Sharpie, you can use a thicker one, you can use a thin one, you can use colored pencil, you can use other markers. So on this example, I would continue outlining. I would get all my outlines in there, and then much like I did with the Piet Mondrian example, but using a wider variety of colors, I would go in and start adding color to all of my geometric shapes using a Sharpie so that it stays nice and bright like Delaunay's work. Again, on the Dali, I might outline parts of it, but not necessarily all of it. And then I'm going to use colored pencil so that I can get some of that smooth shading and all those color transitions that Dali's work was famous for. So once again, just to kind of wrap up, the first thing you're going to be working on are your sketches, because you are required to have 3 different examples of designs by your artist before I give you your blank circle upon which you will be drawing your final design.